Hi everyone. This is a video on the soft and hard policy article by Patrick Jones. I think that the key aspect of this paper, which was written in 2009 as part of it emerged out of a policy symposium that we put together for an ISME conference. I mean, one of the central aspects of here is this kind of tension between in spaces between hard and soft policies, right? This is now 20, not 20, about 12 years old, and a lot has happened. A lot of framing has happened since then. But it is important to kind of articulate how Patrick Jones was one of the first, particularly on the North American environment, to kind of help frame this manner in which policy could be understood in ways that go beyond text, right? So that the idea of soft policy, while they might be textual, but they might be represented in specific guidelines such as admission processes, right? The key aspect of them is their kind of colloquialism, right? And the manner in which they distinguish themselves off policies from hard policies is precisely about the lack of edges, right? The lack of uh, kind of such precise determinations, which are much more clearly seen in kind of hard policies, right? Policies that have to necessitate a real, particularly because they are usually connected to a much larger gamut of individuals, right? They're more macro level, then and therefore they necessitate these kind of boundaries, right? These parameters, which are much more steadfast, much more clearly delineated, often followed by a series of procedures, right? So they establish a whole mechanism for action in many ways, right? Soft policies, on the other hand, as I said, are more colloquial, which means that they are more um, easily adaptable. They are constantly being slightly changed. To a certain extent, they're more conversational, right? In the sense that they are determined and they are modified also through interactions within usually smaller communities, right? And so they not only they define themselves as more um, less fixed, less text based, but they also define themselves by the kind of relationships that they usually kind of put forward, right? And that kind of proximity might have really strong benefit, right? Rather than having something that is more precise and defined, which therefore is more distant and more open also to interpretation. The kind of soft policies require, to a certain extent, to exist and to exist well, right? Any policy can exist without any implication, but to exist with consequence, they require then a kind of a constant interaction, or at least a regular interaction between the stakeholders, right? The people that are there in a particular environment, whatever the policy is. And I think that is one of the critical things that is helpful to think about that. In what ways we establish parameters for action, we establish, almost a sense of practice that is clearly understood by members of a community, that could be easily communicated out to others entering or having to interact with those communities. But they also have a certain porosity, right? They also have a sense of malleability, of changeability that is discursive, meaning that requires that interaction, but they're also um, really responds to the interaction, right? So that they require that kind of a sense of interaction, and therefore make the procedure, the policy, more flexible, more um, livable to a certain extent, right? And so while hard policies come and they can be modified over cycles, and they surely are, and this whole business of policy cycles that are exactly that. You set up an issue, you address it, you create policy, you try to implement, you assess, and you engage again, right? In a hard policy that requires a larger arch. And the kind of sense of soft policies, which can be just as important as kind of larger, more hard established policies. This kind of cycle is much more iterative and much more close to the realities of individuals, communities, stakeholders that they are constantly shaping it. And so this distinction, I think, is really valuable to identify situations and environments and ways these policies can be really seen, but also for us to establish practice interactions with others. And so in that sense, they also have an interesting relationship with what Stephen Ball calls writerly and readerly policies, as we've read before, right? So you can see that there's multiple interpretations of some of these things, and while and they help us in different ways. I think that Patrick Jones exemplifies this in ways that are very North American. But it would be great to have a sense of for us to talk about how you have seen and dealt with, particularly with soft policies, right? Think about the ways in which you have established some of soft policies for your own programs and interactions in with community members, or in committees that you work, or in collaborative interaction, or in establishing particular programs and communicating out with public, right? Think about how the usefulness of these soft policies, how they are read by others, how they help communication, how they streamline work, how they facilitate processes of change, and give us some thought about how you have dealt with that, what you think could exemplify soft policy. It'd be great to see that posted into the comments for our Teams group. Okay, take care. Hope that's helpful.